Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's William Bellamy. I want to talk to you about defunding the police. Now, going into this, I've never served as a law enforcement officer, although I have served as an officer and sergeant in the Missouri Department of Corrections. I have a master's in public administration, and some of the comments I make when I make comparisons, I'll bring up the single mom comparison. And I will make this comparison not due to a stereotype, but based on being the oldest son of a single mom, and a single mom who did everything she could to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads and keep us safe. So, if you like what I have to say, it's a new channel, so please like and subscribe, share with your friends. If you dislike, then hit the dislike button and tell me in the comments what you dislike about what I'm saying or disagree with. We can have a civil discussion about it. You may change my mind, but be careful, I may change yours. Okay, so let's get into this. There's a link below of a Zoom City Council meeting for the city of Minneapolis. Now, in this meeting, they're talking to the Chief of Police or Director of Public Safety. I'm not sure what term they use for the police leadership in Minneapolis, but one of the council members brings up a spate of carjackings in their district. And the police chief says they're doing everything they can to take care of it, and they're trying. Well, this is the same city council that voted unanimously to defund the police and also approve funds for themselves to get private security. Let that sink in. We don't want police officers to protect the average citizen, but because we're in the city council, we deserve private security. And if you're not familiar, private security is pretty expensive. The better quality, the more you pay. And a metropolis like Minneapolis, you're going to pay a good penny for good private security. By the same token, you're going to defund the police, which means the single mom who goes to work every single day and who pays her taxes and is doing everything she can to take care of her family and keep a roof over their heads and keep them fed and keep them safe. She can't own a handgun. She has no police. Nobody's going to fund her to have private security. She's not going to get a tax credit for hiring a bodyguard. Where does that leave them? Who's going to protect them when the police are gone? Now, I understand there's issues in police departments, but I also understand that 99% of police officers go into the profession because they want to protect and serve the average citizen. They want to keep them safe. They want to make their community safe. Now, police officers now are doing the best they can. In places like Minneapolis, they've got limited resources. They have no support. So here's what's really going on, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm guessing because it's the position I'd be in. They're looking for other places to go to work. They're looking for communities that don't vote to defund the police, which is great for mid and small size cities and rural counties because they're getting the best trained officers they could possibly get that are leaving Minneapolis and Portland and New York City and Los Angeles. And they're going to these smaller communities, and they're going to be great police officers in those communities. And the citizens are going to be so much better off having them there. And the police officers themselves are going to feel supported, and they're going to be able to do their jobs. And that's a great thing. I understand wanting to implement more mental health help, and I'm 100% for that. But I know that carjacker at 2 o'clock in the morning, a social worker is not going to stop that from happening. For a social worker to start that happening, the social worker has to be involved when that carjacker is 3, 4, 5 years old. When that carjacker is actually taking a car and pointing a weapon in somebody's face, you need a well-trained police officer to deal with that. And by voting to defund them, you're not going to have that. These same large cities that are voting to defund the police, and we'll use New York as the example, there's already been comparisons made that New York is reverting back to what it was in the 1970s. That's when Times Square was covered with porn shops, prostitutes, and drug dealers. which means tourists aren't going to go there. They don't want to see those things. They're going to go somewhere else. So on top of what you lost because of COVID, you're going to lose even more because of what happens, because of how violent your city is getting. What good does that do anybody, especially the average citizen? Now, everybody has an opinion about the militarization of police. I have mine. It has its good and it has its bad. And if you want to go into a farther discussion of that, let me know in the comments, and I'll do a video just on that alone. And there's also incidents with the uses of force that are bad, and that's fine. Then bring those officers up on charges, bring them to court, hold them accountable for what they've done. But I also know from experience in corrections and in the military, you can have all the cameras you want, to include body cams, and it's not ever going to show the full story. There are decisions made when adrenaline is flowing and it's a dangerous situation that you may have to accept that officer, even though you don't agree with him, did do the right thing with what he knew at that time. But the solution is not defunding. The solution is better training. But better training requires more funding, not less. We, for years, asked many departments to do more with less. And do more with less, and do more with less. And now we're asking them to do more with nothing. So, who are you attracting? If you want to truly fix the problem, it's better training. It's a more vetted process. It's a holistic look at who you're hiring as an officer. Because if you have an officer with a degree in psychology, which would actually be perfect, you're going to have to pay for that if you want to attract them. Because what you're asking for is somebody with a technical degree that's physically fit, that's mentally stable, that has a clean criminal record, that also wants to do it. And that may cost a little bit more money, and the training for them could cost a little bit more money. Now, from the standpoint of training, as I said, I worked as an officer and a sergeant with the Missouri Department of Corrections. With that, Missouri's got a program called Crisis Intervention. And it's a requirement whenever possible to use crisis intervention tactics prior to a use of force. I went to the training. It's a week long. It is taught by instructors who are former corrections officers and mental health professionals. About 70% of it is taught by the mental health professionals. And you learn a lot, and it breaks down the common psychological issues they see with offenders. It's great training. The scenarios are great. As somebody who rarely is at a loss for words, doing those scenarios more than once, I was asking to pause so I can get my thoughts together. But it really makes you stop and think about what happens when you're dealing with one of those people that has a psychological break, or who often hears voices, because you deal with that inside a prison, and that's a controlled environment. Now, I found at least 20 different statistics on the percentage of people that police deal with emotional disturbance issues. The average is about a third of the people they deal with are emotionally disturbed, or they're actively under the influence of a narcotic. From personal experience in a prison in a controlled environment, when offenders are dealing with these, they're extremely hard to deal with. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of time, and using various approaches until you get them to a point where they're semi-coherent and they will listen to you. And this is inside a controlled environment in a prison. On the street where they could harm somebody else, those officers may have a split second to make a decision, which means it's not always the wrong decision. It's often the right decision. Even if it's not popular, even if it's not what people would like to happen. It's more training and finding the right officers. And that will take more funding, not less. Now, when we talk about funding and what to do when you defund the police, let's talk about what communities do when they defund the police. So New York City has decided to take $1 billion from the police budget. And if you don't know, the New York City Police Department is the largest department in the United States. Depending on who you read, they are either the best trained or second best trained next to Los Angeles. Well, with that $1 billion they're pulling out of the police budget, they're going to put that money into mental health programs, homeless programs, and educational services, which on the surface, yes, those need to be funded. They're woefully underfunded in every community. So mental health programs, homeless programs, and educational services are getting $354 million. Now, in my mind, as somebody who has a graduate degree in public administration, I'm not a math genius, but that leaves about $646 million that's not being spent on police. It's not being spent on mental health or homeless or educational services. Maybe it's to make up for budget shortfalls elsewhere, and Bill de Blasio has decided, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon because people want this. And I'm going to take this $646 million and use it to make up for shortfalls somewhere else because of my mismanagement. Because my wife has a $2 million staff. I'm not saying for sure, I'm just, the math that speaks for itself. $1 billion and less than half of it is going to programs that are actually needed. So what's the rest of it going for? I don't know. Bill, give me a call and let me know. If you see this, make a comment and let me know. Maybe it's legitimate, but it doesn't sound that way. Now, speaking from a personal level, the majority of my loved ones and people I care about live in mid to small cities or in rural areas. So the violence going on in Philadelphia, in Minneapolis, in Los Angeles, in Portland really doesn't affect them. What I think about is the single moms and the low-income families. They can't afford to leave. They can't have a weapon to protect themselves. By defunding the police, you take away the one measure of protection they have. So at least add that in your thought process when people discuss defund the police. Think about the average person that has nothing to protect themselves with other than the police. And think about the fact that better training, which is actually needed, and most of them will tell you that, requires more funding. And two, the Minneapolis City Council is a prime example. They voted unanimously to defund the police and then voted to fund private security for themselves. What you can do at every election cycle is vote hypocrites out. Because somebody may have no political experience, could they really do any worse than who's there now? So why not go through a phase the next 10 years we vote incumbents out at every single election? Could we really do any worse than what we have now? But with that being said, I'm against defunding the police. There are issues that can be addressed, but defunding is not the answer to them. What I will say at this point is, like and subscribe if you agree with what I'm saying. Share with your friends. If you disagree, go ahead and subscribe and dislike and tell me in the comments why. And we can have civil debates about every video I post. It's a new channel, so subscriptions, comments, and shares are really what will help the channel the most. So with that, everybody be safe. Hopefully we'll have a safe, calm election. And I'll talk to you later.